Hello, and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I got my marvelous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How are you doing today, Matt?
You know how in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Mr. Fantastic was played by John Krasinski, but in the Fantastic Four movie, Mr. Fantastic was played by Jin Jarin there. I can't remember his name at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But you know who I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the Din Djarin version of myself this week.
Okay, duly noted. Well, friends,
or Joel from The Last of Us, I guess. Yeah, that's another thing he's did.
Well, yeah, that's fair. All right, well, friends, this week we're going to be doing a little bit of discussion about the Sunwell. And why, you might ask? Well, it's topical. With midnight right around the corner. What's that? Like an ointment, yes.
Like an ointment. No, sorry. I shouldn't have said that. You go on.
With midnight right around the corner, it seems relevant that we maybe do a recap or a brief synopsis of the Sunwell and its history, as well as, what its significance is, because it is tied to a lot of elf lore. And I just want to remind everybody that while we do these topical stuff, these episodes every now and then, we do want your questions or anything that you want to hear about. So be sure to send those in to us at podcast@blizzardwatch.com. We just ask that you specify what show it's for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you are not so inclined to email and you want to hit us up on Discord, we have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everybody. And then we also have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open up for, the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open to our Patreon subscribers as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. So I guess let's crack into it. So we're going to aim with like a couple different questions, right? So we're going to answer, what is the Sunwell? Where did it come from? Why is it there? And how is it different from, the Well of Eternity or Surmar's Nightwell? And what significance it would have if it were to fall. So I guess let's start from the beginning. What is the Sunwell, Matt?
The Sunwell is a creation of the High Elves when they first came to what is now the Eastern Kingdoms. It was shortly after the Sundering. As a result of everything that had been going on before and during the Sundering, when the Well of Eternity was destroyed, it was by implosion, and much of ancient Kalimdor was either sunk under the ocean or pushed away from each other. There was a giant vortex at the center of what was once the continent, and the two major continents that we currently know of, with the now current Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms, were separated by a vast ocean. During that time period, as they were rebuilding, the Night Elves essentially said, you know what we hate? Magic. Specifically arcane magic. We had these guys called the Highborn, and they were super into this stuff, and Shara was super into it, and she then began trafficking with demons, and everything went bad, and we had to blow up the night, we had to blow up the Well of Eternity, and everything's bad now, and we don't want any more of that. But there was a sizable number of Highborn who had turned on Ashara and the other Highborn. They were like, no, we don't want to be, controlled and destroyed by demons. This is a bad idea. And they were led by a guy named Dathramar Sunstrider. Sunstrider his name wasn't Sunstrider exactly. It was originally He Who Walks by Day, because most Night Elves are fairly nocturnal, and he wasn't. He liked being out in the daytime. But as a Highborn, he was like, I like my magic. And the other Highborn with him were like, yes, we also like our magic. And so they decided to show off their power, thinking, well, if we show off our power, we got a good chance of actually winning the approval of the others, and they'll back off on this whole no more arcane magic thing. So they created a massive magical storm, and the exact opposite thing of what they wanted happened. Namely, that they were kicked out. The Kalimdor, the Kaldori of Kalimdor were like, get out. We don't care where you go. We don't care what you do, but get out. We don't want you here. Dathramar took that. He's like, all right. One of the reasons that Dathramar did this was because he had a little gift from Illidan Stormrage. When the original Well of Eternity was destroyed by Malfurion Stormrage, Illidan had kept several vials of its waters. He then put 3 of those vials into a lake on top of Mount Hyjal and created the current Well of Eternity,
Hmm.
which drove everybody crazy. And then he ended up with him getting locked up in a barrow guarded by Maiev Shadowsong, who really hated him. But Dathramar had some vials as well, and he took them with him when they left, and they sailed on over until they eventually went up into the Eastern Kingdoms in a place that's pretty familiar to anybody who played an undead in World of Warcraft, because he landed in what is essentially Tirisfal Glades now. And specifically, there's kind of a fairy circle up in the hills and mountains that you can fly to now, but you couldn't back in the day. And it's got all these mushrooms and all these fairy dragons flying around it. They got to that area and they were like, okay, cool. Maybe we'll settle here. We'll take some time, get some sleep. And they had horrific nightmares of horrible monstrosities because there's a Chithraxi, like literally underneath them sleeping. The one Zakajaz, which I always have to say like jazz hands. I'm sorry, but Zakajaz was sleeping there, and the Tomb of Tyr was right there, and they were like, nope, 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 nope. We're leaving. We're not staying here. And so they went and they accidentally ran into what was at that time Amani troll territory, and the Amani were like, they didn't like elves anyway, so they were like, get out. And the highborn at the time, they were highborn, decided, well, no. And they pushed the Amani to a very small fragment of their original territory and went up to what is now the Isle of Quel'Danas, or the Sunwell Island. When they got there, that's when Dathramar used the vials from the original Well of Eternity, but he altered them with his magic. And he did so to tie them to the sun. And it's that, as much as anything else, that led to high elves and later blood elves looking very different from other elves. It literally changed them physically with the magic of the Sunwell, which was tied to the solar cycle as opposed to the lunar cycle. So that's what the Sunwell originally was. That's its origin story.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of other steps in between there, and why it's important, because this is also the end result of essentially being exiled, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
was, uh, he. I should also point out that like during the time of Great Strife, Dathramar was not uh against the Nightborn at all. He actually joined the Kaldori resistance, was the leader of the Highborn as part of the Kaldori resistance, helped them
Yeah,
actually
absolutely.
fight back against the Legion,
Yeah,
saved.
yeah,
I was gonna say,
absolutely. He
he's
loved magic, but he did not love demons.
no, and he was very much against Ajara, as far as her coupling with the demons go. Like he was also instrumental in saving Tyrande Whisperwind, with the idea that she would vouch for them, essentially. Like, yeah, these ones they're not evil, right? They don't want to just blow things up. But then afterwards, with the what we call the exile of the Highborn, which was almost 10,000 years ago. I want to say it's like 7,500 years ago.
No, it's much closer to 10,000. I
Is
think
it
it like
closer to
literally
10,000 now?
happened. It happened within a few dozen years of the end of the original War of the Ancients. Because they were still arguing over whether or not magic was going to have a place.
Well,
They literally just locked Illidan up, and I think that was just like what that was. Illidan getting locked up was not that long after the war,
there's
so it was definitely not. If 7,000 years, that's too close to the, what do you call it, the War of the Emerald guys. Which I can't remember that.
I say look it up while I'm talking, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty close.
Okay.
But the idea was that like eventually what wound up happening is in the aftermath of all the fallout from that war and everything that blew up, arcane magic was now a crime punishable by death. So they left, right? That's when they went to go find this area and find what would become Quel'Thalas. And the Sunwell became a center of their entire civilization. It was a source of power, sure, in much the same way that the Well of Eternity was, but the idea of altering it is that it would, at least in Dathramar's eyes, he felt uh, that it would be something that surpassed the Well of Eternity, that it would become stronger, that it would be something more than its predecessor. In a lot of ways, he was right. And that was the day that the essentially the new High Elves were born. It also powered and allowed them to create the city of Silvermoon. it is the source of power that protected Silvermoon. And if you go back to during the time of Arthas and him sort of waging war as the Death Knight that he was, the magic that he's dispelling and trying to cut through is exactly that. It's magic provided by the Sunwell. It's I think what is it, the Ben Dinarel, I think was the shield, the great shield of the city, something like that. That was
Yeah,
supposed to
yeah,
be
the shield. Yeah,
yeah, that was supposed to repel any invaders. That was powered by the Sunwell, and it was so powerful that even Gul'dan and Zul'jin could not get through it. And
no, they had to actually. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
the only way that they could get through it was actually to have an inside agent, essentially. Which that sort of, and we see that like even during Arthas's assault, it isn't necessarily him that causes the problem. It's trading a trader from within, right? Um,
Yeah, good old undead dude. That's the one who actually takes it down.
Yeah, the Sunwell was also an object of I mentioned with Gul'dan, but during the burning of Quel'Thalas, Gul'dan wanted to use the power of the Altar of Storms to break through it and just could not, because even though the Altar of Storms was crafted from the elves' own runestones, which were actually powered by the Sunwell, he couldn't reverse engineer it. It was just that dang.
Yeah, they had to actually get the ward stones themselves down. By the way, you were right. I had mixed up the War of the Satyr, which was the one I was trying to think of, and the Exile of the High Elves in terms of when they happened.
Sweet.
The War of the Satyr was 9,300 years before the first war, and the Exile of the Highborn was 7,300 years before the first war.
The Sunwell itself, again, remained a very central, powerful focal point of the High Elves for a long time, and we've seen a few things that have been shades of the Well of Eternity and some very pivotal moments around it, such as Kil'jaeden trying to use it as his entry point back into Azeroth. Something that we had seen previously the Well of Eternity be used for, with the countless members of the demonic legions being brought to Azeroth, portals powered by the Well of Eternity. We see that the elves had their essentially, remember how, and we've talked about this before, high elves had immortality granted by the tree. Sunwell basically kind of did this very similar, if not same thing.
Right? Yeah, they weren't actually immortal compared to the night elves lived indefinitely. Whereas you could age and die as a high elf, but it was a very long time.
Yeah, you were functionally, I want to say functionally immortal.
Like, let me put it this way: in the several thousand years of the high elf kingdom, they only had 3 kings, and one of them was Dathramar, who essentially was already extremely old by elf standards when he took the throne. So only really Anasterion and Kael'thas were the only ones to really, and I guess I'm calling Kael'thas a king here, and I shouldn't, but he would have been king if he had not gone cuckoo for magic buffs. So yeah, they did last a very long time. They were not dying very quickly.
Yeah. And now this is a font of incredible power, and again, the comparison most often recently given is the Nightwell, something that is akin to the Sunwell, though not exactly the same. So the Nightwell, while being a font of incredible power created by the Highborn, which is essentially a convergence of ley lines that is sustained through the Eye of Aman'Thul, which is one of the pillars of creation. It's very similar to the Sunwell in that it is not it is not the Well of Eternity. It is not the natural wound left behind from the plucking of an old god from the flesh of a nascent titan, but instead a arcane creation, I guess would be the best way to put it, that was cultivated for a specific need.
Yeah, and also unlike either the Well of Eternity or the Sunwell, the Nightwell taps into the power of the Eye of Aman'Thul, and Aman'Thul is the one who granted, Nozdormu his power. He has power over time, and that's the power that the Nightwell taps. That's why when we killed their queen, we had to basically go through a multiple, back and forth time encounter, because they had power over time almost as good as the Bronze Dragonflight, if not equivalent.
Yeah, the interesting thing here, though, is unlike the Sunwell or the Well of Eternity, the Sunwell being a declaring lineage from the Well of Eternity, this doesn't have a tie with the Well of Eternity at all,
No,
aside from its proximity to the former temple of Elune
I
and
mean,
buildings over there. But what I'm getting at here is the interesting thing is, like, remember how we said that the Sunwell essentially gave high elves essentially a longer life, the just by passively being there. This didn't. The Nightwell does not. In fact, the Nightwell, while it could sustain somebody, essentially freeze them in time, had to be distilled into arc wine in order for the Nightborn to take full effect of it. And as a matter of fact, you see the sort of breakdown about that when we're in Legion and we start going through this as the power of the well starts to wane, or as the arc wine is being kept for more people. They don't necessarily die, but they become almost undead husks of their former selves. Something we've seen with the curse that Xal'atath wound up having with the power addiction that his people suffered, which we could probably talk about that a little bit. But there is enough differences between the two that while they are similar in that they were not exactly sanctioned creations, they are not on the same power scale because they draw power from completely different sources.
another way to look at it is that the power of the Nightwell is not native to Azeroth.
No, it's not at all.
It comes from the Eye of Aman'Thul, who is certainly a Titan and certainly helped shape Azeroth. The Eye of Aman'Thul was definitely one of the pillars of creation, but it wasn't nature. We've seen this recently with Dragonflights. The Dragonflights used to take their power from other members of the Titan pantheon. Now they're all basically empowered by the planet itself. The Well of Eternity and the Sunwell, as the descendant of the Well of Eternity, draw their power ultimately from Azeroth. The Nightwell does not, which might be why the Sunwell is the thing that they're targeting in Midnight. Not just because it's got a powerful light thing, although we know it does, and we'll be talking about that, but because it is actually more directly tied to Azeroth, whereas the Nightwell is not. It is a separate thing. It is empowered by another Titan.
Now, the Sunwell was not exactly always pristine. As a matter of fact, there have been several things that have happened around the Nightwell that are, I don't want to say just interesting story wise, but it itself has had its share of ups and downs. What would you say, Matt, was probably the worst thing that has happened to it besides the dependency that the High Elves drew from it?
I mean, we're talking about the Sunwell, because I thought you said Nightwell there, so I was a little confused.
Sorry, I meant to say Sunwell. I apologize.
One of the things about the Sunwell was, I think, the worst thing that ever happened besides the addiction was what happened during the Scourge invasion. Unlike when Zul'jin and Captain Evil, Gul'dan, were trying to attack the city and couldn't get past the barrier, Arthas, as a former human and currently a minion of the Scourge, he had a lot more insight. He'd been to Quel'Thalas. He'd been, like, as an allied nation, he'd done visits of state. He knew how the giant warding stones worked. Not like magically speaking. He just knew big warding stones, these are what keeps the thing up. These are what keep the rings of the barrier up. Because the barrier, the Great Shield, didn't just have one. It had multiple layers. You had to penetrate all of them. So when he wasn't the Lich King yet, but he was the servant of the Lich King at this time. He was a Death Knight. When he came walking up to Quel'Thalas, he knew he couldn't get through those by himself. So a guy named Darkhan Drathir was his point of weakness. It was his access. And the reason he picked Drathir is that Drathir was power hungry enough to deal with him and to do what he needed, which is to essentially corrupt each of the warding stones and bring them down. Without him doing this, they couldn't have gotten through. Like, this is just a fact. For one thing, they would have lost it just because they were trying to fight Sylvanas, and Sylvanas knew all the tricks, but she didn't know who was exactly in charge of the Scourge at the time, and how that he had managed to contact and suborn one of the Magisters of Quel'Thalas. Because that was unthinkable, right? Why would a Magister turn on the Quel'Thalas and help the Scourge? because then the power that they all drew, the power they lived through, was the Sunwell. Like, why would he want to help someone get to the Sunwell? Not realizing the answer was so he would be so powerful he would no longer be dependent on. Drakon did what he did. He helped bring down the Wardstones. Sylvanas ultimately was beaten because she had to keep falling back. And when Baron, I can never pronounce this word. You just said it too. That's what's really embarrassing. Baron Donnell? I don't remember how to pronounce that. But it's, yeah. When that finally was breached, that's what led to the death of Sylvanas, because Sylvanas wouldn't retreat past a certain point. So Arthas killed her and raised her as a banshee. And then finally, when he got to the Sunwell, he threw Kel'Thuzad's phylactery into the Sunwell, which immediately brought him back as a lich, because it could now access all that arcane power, which it then ultimately polluted, which left it, you couldn't access it anymore. It would kill you. So when that happened, that's when you get the Withered. It's the Withered, right? Or is the Withered the Nightwell ones?
Withered are I believe, the Nightwell.
So it's the Wretched.
The Wretched,
right? Yeah, the Wretched.
Either way, I can't remember which is which, but there is functionally the same thing.
Basically, what would happen was that as the need for the Sunwell's power became stronger, people would be turned into twisted little monstrosities, and they would run around just trying to drain the mana out of anything alive that had any. You've seen it before. Basically, they were 28 days later, but elves. And all of that happened because they needed the power of something on the scale of the Sunwell to bring a lich back. Because Kel'Thuzad needed to not just be a lich, he needed to have full control of his powers and capabilities, because he was going to be the one to summon the legions, specifically Archimonde. It was Archimonde that was the whole goal this whole time. In order to pull that off, Kel'Thuzad needed to have power on the scale of the Sunwell to do it. So, yet again, someone's trying to use one of these wells to come through into Azeroth. First, Sargeras tried to use the original Well of Eternity to come through. Then, later on, this happens. And then after this, Kil'jaeden attempts to use the Sunwell to bring himself through again. So, over and over again, this is what they're trying to do with these things. They're trying to use them to power portals that would otherwise be impossible to power in order to step through. So, yeah, that's. I think that'd be the worst thing that ever happened to the Sunwell.
All right. I don't know if it qualifies as the worst thing or one of the worst things that happened to it, but I will say that this is one of the weirdest things to happen to it. And I was
wondering if you were going to bring that up.
Yeah, I'm going to have to bring up Envina, because it's not... Warcraft has a thing where between the manga, the books, and the comics, some of the stuff of the olden days didn't make it into canonized lore. And this is one that did. Avina,
Yep.
Avina started as, I believe it was the manga, right? It was...
it was the Sunwell trilogy in the manga, yeah.
Yeah, the Sunwell trilogy, where after the corruption or the attempted corruption of the Sunwell, having a conscious thought process, apparently, took all of its energy and distilled it down into that of a little girl. Wasn't
the Red Dragon involved in that?
I was going to say, the other one is that Coral Straz was behind the illusion, secreting away the power of the Sunwell, and then having Avina live with a living and doting mother in a small farmhouse somewhere near Tarn Mill, because everything always happens near Tarn Mill. If you played vanilla, you'll understand that. In Burning Crusade, Lothammar had found out about the existence of Avina after everything had been said and done, and was trying to, at some point, originally keep her presence a secret from Kael'thas, who was just gone on his little his adventures in Outland, we'll say. And he was worried that the prince would be very brash in any decisions he made if he figured it out. But after a while, Lothammar decided, you know what? Why not? Let's just go ahead and tell the prince. Maybe it'll get him to come back home, because he's been gone forever. And then his messengers get intercepted by agents of the Legion, and then Kil'jaeden finds out that not only does the Sunwell exist, because that was the thing they weren't too sure about to begin with, that it now is in the form of a young woman that they could probably try to hold hostage. And hold hostage they did. So, yeah, it gets real complicated there. Demon Lord wanted to place, so Kil'jaeden wanted Kael'thas under his control and needed the prince to lose all hope of restoring his kingdom, which meant he needed to get Avina. And then Kil'jaeden ordered the prince to capture Avina and Muru and weave their energy into a ritual to summon him into our world through the Sunwell. You see Avina was imprisoned in a field of arcane power, with her power slowly being drained into the Sunwell, which is where we come in with the Shattered Sun Offensive and start sieging the Sunwell Plateau. Now, the other side of this is Kalecgos is tied up within all of this as well because he meets Unvina and falls in love with Unvina. So Kalecgos, a dragon who later become the blue dragonflight aspect, fell in love with the Sunwell. It is a weird and confusing and roiling plot that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And when we get there, we don't save the girl, right? We don't save this being. No. This being decides to end their existence by dumping all of their power back into the Sunwell, which was it makes no sense to me because going back on it, they were draining her essence into the Sunwell anyway. But she essentially causes a feedback loop that causes Kil'jaeden to essentially be killable or banishable. Go ahead.
Here's my thing on that one. I've always thought this about it. There's a pretty big difference between your essence being drained out of you and put into it and you just returning to a state of existence that you had forever. The Sunwell had a mind and an intent before it became Anvina Teague. And it might just simply be going back to that state. And also, getting away from all these people who keep trying to kidnap her. Which is just, I don't know. I will say, however, that it is one of the stranger stories that World of Warcraft has for us. So you're damn right on that one.
Yeah, and the other interesting too is like in order to purify the well, Muru had to be essentially sacrificed. Which also this has led Matt and I to countless tinfoil hats, random tangents, and weird things about Naru specifically because of this canonical interaction. Like literally the heart of Muru is used to purify the Sunwell of whatever corruption was there to begin with and return it back to its unique state. But also, and here's the other thing that they never talk about again, not even in Dragonflight, and I don't understand why this never comes up. But even at the end of it, like a little tiny portion of Avina, or Anvina, imbued Kalik with a portion of herself. Like, literally leaving a piece of her to live on in his heart. Because I know I posted this in our Discord channel for us, but I think about this every single time. If you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Sokka's girlfriend gets turned into the moon, he's trying to explain to it to Zuko.
That's rough, buddy.
He just literally, it's just my girlfriend got turned into the Sunwell, and then like it's Kalecgos explaining this to Rathian, and Rathian going, "That's rough, buddy," because that's all I hear in my head every single time we talk about this. But it's just such a left field story and very indicative of like what the time was of Burning Crusade. Like the Sunwell was important, but it wasn't clearly defined what that importance was yet. Like at this point, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, it really very much to me felt like they were treating the Sunwell as just the Well of Eternity 2.0 because they didn't really know what direction they wanted to go with it. And
that's fair.
And then we find out so many other things like the high elves, or now we call them blood elves, addiction to power, that being staved off by the Sunwell, but then if they're exiled from it or gone too long from it, they start turning into withering husks of themselves. The Sunwell being so tied into the creation of what are now blood elf paladins and sort of like learning what the light is and sort of like defending of that light are all tied up in it. Like it's gained at least a separate identity compared to the other wells, which I think is proper. The Nightwell benefited from coming later, right? It was in Legion when the Nightwell was really truly introduced. They had gone through all of the revisions between the Well of Eternity, between it becoming essentially the Maelstrom, between the Sunwell, and understanding a little bit more of like where they wanted elves to go. The Sunwell didn't. The Sunwell's existed since the game launched, technically. Um, it
I mean, it
just
goes back to Warcraft 3,
it
really.
does. Even beyond that, doesn't it? It goes beyond
I
Warcraft
don't know
3.
if it's actually mentioned in Warcraft 2, but I mean, it might have been mentioned in tie-in material. I just know that it really gets mentioned in Warcraft 3.
I think it does get mentioned in Warcraft 2, but I think it's more generically. This is gonna okay. Side quest here, or side little note. In Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, they refer to the light a lot as a deity. And there are lines, I believe, in Warcraft 2 where the elven archers, which are high elven archers that are working with the Alliance, not night elves. All elven units in Warcraft are Warcraft RTSs are high elves until the third game. Where they mentioned something about like fighting for the light or whatever, and it seemed like it was just a reference to a generic source of power back home. You never see Quel'Thalas, you never do anything with Silvermoon City back then. Like it's sort of hand waved, like it's not filled in.
Yeah.
The blanks haven't been flushed out yet. So
I mean, there's the one thing where you have a chance to at least tease out some idea about it is the fact that Gul'dan's Altars of Storms, because the Altars of Storms are made from the rune stones that powered the warding stones. So essentially, he had knocked down some of the very same stones that were part of Barandel in order to try and destroy it, and it didn't work. Like because the warding stones weren't allowing power to come back into them.
mm-hmm.
Like they were directed outward. You couldn't feed power into them from these previous runestones that were now your altars and storms. It was like trying to like plug something into itself to blow itself up. It just doesn't do anything. But that's the only thing I can think of that's in Warcraft 2 that you could think about that. Because, the burning of Quel'Thalas happened. They got some of the way into the actual forest, Eversong Forest. They did kill, for example, most of the Windrunner family.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst it was not successful, it does seem to set up the concept of the Sunwell. Even if it's not actually directly mentioned, they did have Barandel and they did get the power from somewhere. And yeah, we know now that power was coming from the Sunwell. I think the other problem with the Sunwell was that they actually kind of technically had the High Elves before they had invented the lore.
Yeah,
for the Well of Eternity.
Yeah, I think well, maybe not before the Well of Eternity, but definitely before the Sunwell. High Elves were.
I mean, I think they invented the lore for the Well of Eternity for Warcraft 3. I don't think they really had much lore for the Well of Eternity before that game.
Well, Night Elves didn't exist before Warcraft 3. Like they weren't even a mention in the
a lot of this stuff basically just kind of like it's kind of like watching that dominoes thing where you have a bunch of bricks on a wall and you knock them down and they all fly down flat like dominoes, but then the last one kicks back and then they all kick back and suddenly you have a layer again. I think it's like that, whereas like all this stuff was set up and none of it was really connected well, and then finally somebody like pushed it and they're like, okay, now it makes sense. Make it make sense, everybody. But definitely I think that you're right in that the Nightwell feels a lot more concretely rooted in previous lore than the Sunwell did. The Sunwell felt like just, and they have their own well. That's up during the day.
And a lot of this is like, and this is not, and we're not throwing you shade or anything on it. I want to make that perfectly clear.
No, it was developed over 20 years, guys. Come on.
Even longer, right? Like it's because we're going deeper and deeper and deeper. Well, but like this is the epitome of, as people who run tabletop games, this is the epitome of doing it live, right? Like it's the choices evolving to take on something that you maybe didn't originally intend for it to do, and it becoming such an integral part of the story and world. Like, let's be honest, there's very few players who don't know what the Sunwell is, even those who are coming to the game late. And even ones that are joining now at the hype for Midnight becoming very, very real, it's very present. It's right there. You understand it as an important piece. And when we get into Midnight, they're probably going to do some, or close to Midnight, some background explaining or some recapping of why it's important and what it is. That would make logical sense as far as I'm concerned. But I want to go into the other part of this, which is what would it mean for the Sunwell to truly fall? Because I think that itself is an interesting prospect. Why is it?
Yeah,
Why do we think it's important, and why does Xal'atath's assault, if it is successful here, why it's important, and also why Xal'atath is attacking the Sunwell and not the Nightwell?
the first thing I think we should mention when we're talking about this is that one of the weird things about the Sunwell is that we already thought it was destroyed once. And of all people, it was Xal'atath's Sunstrider who everyone thought destroyed it. Because when it had been corrupted, he went up to it and said, I can't purify this. And so he used his magic to essentially disperse it.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought he'd won. And if it wasn't, of all people, it was, again, Darthon Drathier there, or Darkon Drathier, who was the one who first thought, wait a minute, how did he destroy it? I mean, that's not how huge fonts of magic power work, which led to the discovery of Anvina by the Scourge. The Legion was looking for it, and the Scourge was looking for it, and blah, blah, blah. All of that came out of the fact that Xal'atath failed to blow it up in the first place. I think if it falls this time, the reason that this is more complicated is partially the thing I said before about it being an actual powered by Azeroth. But the other thing is that it's a Naru in the heart of the thing.
Yeah, this is like it's like an amalgamation, isn't it? Like, if you really consider it.
Yeah, and the thing about Naru is they flip.
They have a cycle.
They flip between light and shadow, and that makes the Sunwell pretty similar to Belemeth, the giant underground crystal that flips between light cycle and dark and shadow. It flips between light and void. And I was thinking about this in relation to, we know about the Atomai crystals, which were a series of crystals that were essentially created originally by the Naru. And we don't know what they made them from. There was originally one of the crystals. It was the crystal that, if you don't know who Velen is the Draenei who essentially led his people away from their homeworld, Argus, and kept them from being turned into the demonic Eridar that we now have. Velen found this crystal on Argus, and it was way older than Draenei culture. And he used it to contact the Naru, who came and picked his people up. But in the process, the crystal was fragmented, and we had a bunch of different ones. One of them being Leaf Shadow, if you're familiar with Burning Crusade lore. Leaf Shadow is the Atomai crystal that was used to hide a Draenei settlement that eventually got found by the orcs and wiped out because the Draenei used it in front of two orcs. Orgrim Doomhammer and Thrall's dad, whose name I can't, Durotan, sorry, not Durotar. Durotar is the land, is the area. Durotan, Thrall's father. And those two ultimately used it to reveal this hidden settlement and ultimately destroy it during the war between the Horde and the Draenei. All of this is to say, the various Atomai crystals all had weird powers based around color and light. And if we know anything about Xal'atath, it's that she is completely unafraid to go to other worlds. And in fact, as a herald of Dimensius, has probably been to lots of other worlds. And one of the worlds we know Dimensius got to, at least in avatar form, was Outland. So I think that there's a reason related to the fact that there is a Naru sleeping in that thing that she is interested in. Because if for no other reason that we know that Naru can convert light into void and void into light. So I think that's one possibility we have to. I'm not shutting up so you can.
No, it is something that has definitely, crossed my mind, and I agree with you. It's also fascinating, again, going back to the whole amalgam thing, that it has so many different pieces, right? And
the original Well of Eternity water, then the power of the Naru, and the weird cleansing deal that all happened. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's also one of those things where I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. The Sunwell has a sentience that was not given to the other, right? At least it's not ascribed to it in any capacity anywhere else. We don't hear about the Nightwell being a conscious entity. We don't hear about the original Well of Eternity being a conscious entity. The original Well of Eternity, we hear about Elune, traveling in and out of it, doing whatever Elune did. But the Sunwell has has always been ascribed a sort of intelligence, which is why Avina came to be. And this is back in Burning Crusade, so this is early. And then the idea that it has the core of a Naru in it, that's another cosmic intelligence being given to it. So you have, multiple pieces of intelligence given to it, and the fact that it is channeling the light. And I think that's one of the interesting things that can't be understated, and it has since the very beginning, right? It's always been light, tied to the sun, tied to the same sort of energies we see being used by the why can't I think of their name now? The folks underground.
The dwarves?
No, the humans, the Arathi.
Arathi, okay.
Yeah.
Well, not just the Arathi, though. I mean, there's a much closer example of people who used the light with a solar theme. Tauren.
Yeah.
The Sunwalkers.
Yeah, we have the Sunwalkers
and heck,
as
their
well.
Their name is even Sunwalker, which is not that far from Sunstrider.
But you're
He
also
who walks by day.
But you're also right in that, again, what did the Sunwalkers talk about Anshi? They talked about Anshi being an intelligent living being. So there's level of personage that the Sunwell has that the others don't. And
not just that, but you made a good point here that I think we need to talk about for a second. Not only does it have a level of actual being, like I am a being, I have a mind. It now has the potential to have at least two of them, or to have one that is the combination of more than one of them. Like, what if Anvina and Muru are one thing inside that thing now?
Yes, they've become something more. Which we can go to Shadowlands and talk about how we've established that that's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of soul fragments, and you can take fragmented souls and just jam them together in different ways. Could they have essentially grafted each other together because neither was whole anymore? Like that is something we've seen happen. So yeah, it is something to consider. And here's the thing: why would that be of importance to Xal'atath? Because that's the thing we keep. I don't know if we forget it so much as we don't really think about the consequences of the fact that the thing inside the elf body that we're currently calling Xal'atath is actually only most of the previous Xal'atath. Like the blade that we had as Xal'atath before that blade was, it was taken from that. But the blade still worked. The blade was still powerful enough to penetrate the carapace and allow us to attempt to kill an old god. And so it keeps coming back to this for me. What if she's trying to do the same thing we've seen in places like Shadowland? What if she wants to graft more to herself? Not just get more powerful, to get more being.
Well, you mentioned that, and there's certainly an element of it, right? Like an element of maybe she's trying to become more, but then I get to this idea of transformation, because that's the other theme that the Sunwell has that the others do not, right? The Well of Eternity didn't change. It blew up. The Nightwell did not change. It just had the Eye of Aman'Thul ripped out of it, right? It was a focusing lens for ley lines. That's all it was, right? The Sunwell, out of all of them, has transformed thrice at least, right? It went from the water of the Wells of Eternity to being its own thing, modified by high arcane magics of the Sunwalk, or Sunstriders.
But it's really close name, guys.
Really close. It was distilled into the essence of a living being, and then that living being
who had a life.
Who had a life and memories and love. Yeah.
Fell in love with a crazy dragon.
Follow me here on this one now. Lived a life, right? What do we know generates from when you live a life? Anima. Grows in power. She didn't die. She was not killed. She didn't go to the Shadowlands. She distilled her energy back into the Sunwell with all of that fresh anima, lovely fresh anima, right back into there. And she had a lot of very strong emotions. And we know that causes an overabundance of anima to begin with as well. Then you have Muru being tied into the mix as well, in being at least distilled down and transformed into whatever the current state of the Sunwell is. 3 times, at least 3 times, that the Sunwell has changed and transformed and morphed. And with that addition of Muro, like you said, it has the ability to understand shadow. I think that Xal'atath might be looking maybe potentially at her own place outside of the cycle and why she's outside. Because think about it. She's a spirit or an entity of some type, originally a void entity that was shoved into the carapace of an old goddess of prison that was given freedom, but that freedom basically says that she got shoved into the corpse of an old elf mage, right? She has transformed as many times as the Sunwell. She might be looking to transform some more. And maybe, and I don't know what the end game is, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Xal'atath is there to save us all. But we talk about this a lot, right? We talk about there's an end game that we can't possibly understand. And it very clearly involves the Titans at some point. She might be looking to become a new evolution of what she is. She studied Belladar. She brought Belladar out of a light cycle into a cycle of light and dark, right? We know that she caused that. They literally tell you that. So what if she's studying transformation and is looking to evolve herself? And that's why it's important.
Yeah, I mean, also the thing to consider too is that in a weird way, the Well of Eternity got blown up, but there's obviously a new one because you put the water on a lake, and now that lake's full of the same thing, which is weird. But if you think about it this way, the original Well of Eternity was transformative to others.
Oh yeah, I mean, we can go with that, and we can go with the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. Let's go through both.
Yeah, the waters there transformed things that came into contact with.
Mm-hmm.
The Sunwell may be the only one that's ever transformed itself, essentially, or been transformed and then transformed itself again. Like, it's sort of like taking, what's the thing about the subtext? Now it's just text.
Yep.
The Sunwell feels like it's kind of like the subtext is now text. I change you, I change me, and that could be another thing to think about is if somebody wants to change themselves, how better to learn how to make that happen than to go to the place that has been changed and changed others. And even the Sunwell's absence changes things. It changed high elves into ravening mana addicts. So there is a lot to consider about why she might want it. But I definitely think that it makes sense that it would be her target. The very fact that it's got a Naru in it, the very fact that it channels light, and we saw what happened when the Void Elves came into contact with it. It went crazy. It was not happy that they were there. It was very much like a get out, get out, get out. Was it doing that as a defense mechanism? Because it didn't want to change again?
Yeah, because it didn't want to go through its cycle again. Because again, at the center of it, we have Muru.
Yeah, so there's a lot of potential for why the Sunwell would be the thing that she's going for. Much more so than the Nightwell. The Nightwell is currently essentially inert.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the Eye of Aman'Thul,
the Nightwell,
so it can't tap the... Go ahead.
The Nightwell technically doesn't exist anymore. Because
the structure's still there.
The structure is, but the Eye of Aman'Thul is gone, right? We took it, right? In the last moments. And then the Eye was being used to focus the ley lines, and we know that the ley lines are drifting back to their normal positions, as is evident by Dragonflight, right? The opening sequence of Dragonflight is these ley lines essentially moving back to their normal positions and waking stuff up. So technically, I don't think the Nightwell actually exists. The structure does, but I don't think it appreciates it to work.
Yeah, in order to get it to work, you'd eventually have to take the Eye of Aman'Thul and put it back. And then you'd have to...
Or the focusing iris.
Yeah. Maybe the focusing iris. I don't think the focusing iris would actually do it. I think you need something that can actually safely move ley lines.
I don't think anything can safely move ley lines, let's be honest.
Fairly safely, let's say. Because, less destructive than when they...
Sure.
When of all things, when Malygos was doing it, he was messing stuff up. And Malygos was empowered by a Titan.
Yeah, and he didn't care.
Yeah. So if he couldn't do it safely, it's hard to think that anything could do it safely. But we did see that the Eye of Aman'Thul was at least as powerful as Nozdormu. So maybe it could do it. Or maybe it couldn't. I don't know. But right now, with the Nightwell essentially at best inert and at worst just gone, That leaves the Well of Eternity on top of Mount Hyjal, which has been monkeyed with in the past and is now extremely hard to get to.
Yeah, I was gonna say also, I don't think of all the places, I think that's probably gonna be more heavily guarded than the actual Sunwell itself at this point.
Yeah, well, because I mean, what did both Deathwing and Ragnaros tried to use its power?
Yep.
Archimonde tried to absorb its power
Mm-hmm.
because he was trying to draw it from the tree.
It also has something on it that the Sunwell doesn't. There's a new-ish world tree above it, right?
Or the same one kind of regrown.
Yeah,
I'm not
like
sure.
we haven't that story hasn't been clarified yet, but the Sunwell doesn't have that. It doesn't.
No, there's no big giant world tree, and we all know weird giant trees seem to have a big deal involving these kind of things. So, looking at you, Elune and your girlfriend, so that was weird. You guys are weird.
Yeah, but I mean, like, in terms of like what potential catastrophic event would happen from Xal'atath getting her hands on the Sunwell, the interesting thing is, it's one of the rare instances where we don't actually know.
Yeah, we have no idea.
Because aside from the immediate effect on the elves that live in that area and that land, there's no indication that it would have an effect otherwise, right? Like, even though it's made out of bits of Titan and bits of sentience and anima and bits of a Naru, the only thing we know that it is directly tied to is the magics in and around Silvermoon City and Quel'Thalas. So maybe the revitalization of Quel'Thalas stops. Maybe it backslides. Maybe Silvermoon starts to crumble because the magics that are powering it, that ambient magic from the Sunwell, is no longer there to help enable it and keep it going. But the greater part of it affecting the world, we have no idea because nothing else really ties to it that we know of. And I'm sure that's going to change. I'm sure at midnight we're going to get more information about that. And we're going to see all of the myriad of reasons why the Sunwell falling would be a terrible idea, because that's the nature of that story, right? Short of the trolls being emboldened to wage another war, I can't think of anything. Can you?
The only thing I can think of is that with the Well of Eternity being essentially replaced by the smaller one and the original one formed into the Maelstrom, the collapse of a font of power like this could do something similar in that it could punch a hole into another reality.
Do you think this might be the goal?
Original Well of Eternity? I mean, it might be, but it depends entirely on what would it punch to. The original Well of Eternity punched into essentially Deep Home. Like, in fact, if you go down into the Maelstrom, you end up in Deep Home, because that giant pillar that used to, the literal pillar, not one of the artifacts from Legion, the pillar that held up the world was right there. Like when the Deathwing punched through, he disrupted all that, and that's why it was connected. Would that happen again? If the Sunwell was hit in such a way, could you punch a hole into another elemental plane? Would you want to? Would you be limited to all elemental planes, or could you get somewhere else? I don't think. The other thing that comes to mind too is that we only know of one. We know of a place that links to Zereth Mortis on Azeroth.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we do.
That's the only one we know of.
Yep.
We don't know any of the other places that connect to any of the other Zereths. But if you're looking for a candidate to be possibly connected to Zereth Ortis, the Sunwell's a pretty good bet.
I mean, and we do often associate light and order together, and with it being a font of light, yeah, there could be something there.
Plus, there's also Titan facilities not that far away from it.
Yeah, but I feel like we are at that point now. We're saying the Titan facilities aren't very far away from blank. Is like you're just kind of shooting at a dartboard because they're
or it's bingo, or it's bingo. Titan facility not too far away, but I mean, I do think that it's worth pointing out that not just that there's a Titan facility near it, but that the way the Sunwell was constructed, why is it on an island? Why was it not actually in Quel'Thalas? Why did they take it north? Why put it on Quel'Danas? I definitely think there's a reason for that. And I think maybe that might be another thing we're going to find out, especially with the Haranir being part of Midnight. Because the Haranir know stuff they are not telling us.
Yeah, and I think that's another interesting point too, right? Like, what do the Haranir know that we don't? And I mean, very clearly the Haranir have a tradition keeping alive stories or knowledge that we have long since forgotten. And the Haranir are very, I don't want to say very clearly because I'm not playing in the alpha and we haven't gotten there yet. So I don't know any truth of the validity of the statement, but I do believe from the very first time any of us saw it, and I'm not unique in this, they look like the missing link between Night Troll and Night Elf. And if that is the case, they may have more cultural knowledge than even the elves do, because the elves seem to have forgotten about their time as night trolls. And I think that's intentional, almost like a scrubbing of that part of their existence. And when you do that, you tend to erase mythology, thought processes, or learned stories that may have been relevant because they weren't from air quote you. And the Haranir may have access to that. They may know more about, they may understand the Sunwell better than the elves themselves and
Well,
what
for
it
that
means to
matter,
Azeroth and
yeah.
how it communicates or ties in with the ecosystem of Azeroth.
Well, here's another thing too. We don't know why that place was chosen. We don't even know, like, we've never seen the creation of the Sunwell.
No.
There's nothing in game. There's no books that have actually, other than like, and then they created the Sunwell. But there's
Technically,
no
I think,
narrative passages.
yeah, nothing canonical. I think there's technically something in the RPG book that shows it, but there's nothing like explicitly that says, yes, this is the actual.
Yeah, and as a result, we don't know anything about why Dathramar chose that. And the fact that Dathramar's last name is so close to Sunwalker, like Sunstrider, Sunwalker, it's practically the same thing. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, wait a minute. Elune was said to be born in the Well of Eternity, come out at night, go through the sky, and descend back into the Well of Eternity. But the Tauren and others believed in both Elune, or Aparo,
And Anshe.
and Anshe. And Anshe is the sun. Did the sun go up and down in the Sunwell? Like, is this site a site that was used previously for something?
And is it important because the mythology informed the belief, and therefore the belief made it a place of importance? Because we've seen that as a theme as well in Warcraft
Yeah, absolutely.
as well.
And for that matter, all this stuff can be true. Like, or at least some of it can be. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be multiple things. Like,
Yeah.
did Dathramar choose it because it suited myth? Did it suit myth because it was actually the site of something?
Is it a ley line that
yeah.
exists? Or here's another interesting one, and I want to end with this one, because we're running out of time here. And this has been on my mind recently too, is does the Sunwell have a direct interaction with the Arathi Empire? Because where the Arathi founded on like maybe an adjacent point that this lays on, because they have a lot of the similar mythology, or at least from what we learned from the Arathi. And I said this to you, and I said this before we even got into the War Within, the Arathi reminded me of High Elves.
Well, I mean, they're straight
descended
up
from
are
them.
High Elves.
Yeah, they're descended from them.
There's even like one High Elf. He's a straight up High Elf on the expedition that we meet when we're down there. He's like the one who's like was effectively her adoptive father. He's a High Elf. Like, there's just no way around it. Some of the Arathi are descended from them. Some of them just are.
Yeah.
The oldest ones, because, they live a long freaking time. And the thing is that with Belemeth as this thing that was calling out to their emperor, I'm starting to wonder if Belemeth is on the Beledar. Sorry, yeah, Beledar.
Belemeth is the city. Yeah.
Yeah. But Beledar could be like directly in between if you go through the planet.
Right.
Like, if instead of traveling on the surface, what if you go straight from the Sunwell, straight down, you could smack straight into Beledar, and then keep going past it, and you come out on the other side, and you're now in the Arathium. And that's why the Arathi went there, because the High Elves among them were called there, because the sun would lead them there. And that's why Dathramar, the Sunstrider, went to the one he went to.
Because he was called to it.
Yeah. So that's one possibility too. There's a lot of possibilities.
I think we're going to find some weird links with the Arathi. It's just, my gut tells me this. And we're going to see some weird Arathi and some Blood Elf give and take. Like, we saw that the Army of Light shows up in the trailer. I would be absolutely chuffed and I would be surprised, but I would cheer if Arathi wound up showing up as well. But we'll see. That's neither here nor there. But hopefully you enjoyed our little discussion about the Sunwell. I think it's going to do it for right now. Friends, Blizzard Watch is made possible due to generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast signing community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to our podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast, to the Q&A Answer Site experience. Again, I want to remind you, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, please be sure to send those in. You can send them to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for, as well as any special pronunciation for your name. And if you are just a Discord user and you want to hit us up on Discord, you can do so. We have the Q and Podcast questions channels open to everybody. Same rules apply. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, you do have access to the Patreon Q and Podcast questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. But with that, folks, we'll see you next week.